For many years, I have been a fan of the anime movie masterpiece, Akira, a cyberpunk post-apocalyptic style film that took the world by storm and almost single-handedly was the reason people began to take anime more seriously outside of Japan. I do highly recommend this film, and it works perfectly fine as its own entity, and you don't have to have read the manga to be able to watch it and understand it. Well, maybe understand it a little bit. But I finally did read the manga, and I have to say, the manga counterpart written by Katsuhiro Otomo is more insane than I could have possibly imagined. Now, the manga and anime do follow the same basic structure up to a point, but a lot of events happen very differently in the manga, and the first thing that I noticed was just how quick the pacing of the manga actually is. This thing moves at a breakneck speed, and every single chapter is filled to the brim with more chaos and moving plot elements that just make it more and more complex as things move forward. If you're unfamiliar with the property entirely, the basics of it are like this. It opens with a huge explosion that ignites the beginning of World War III, and this took place in 1992. Now, the manga was beginning to be written in 1982, so at the time, that was the near future. But then the manga immediately jumps forward to the year 2030, after the world has already dealt with the aftermath and fallout for a few decades. Tokyo was rebuilt into the now Neo-Tokyo, and things are a mess, and the youth run wild in gangs and commit acts of violence to a very large degree, basically showing themselves as the result of growing up in this torn-up world. Our first group of main characters is a teenage bike gang run by Kaneda, who is extremely skilled and respected within his circle of friends. As a character, he's very charismatic, he's a bit of a smartass, he's the typical punk kid, but he's got a strong loyalty to his crew and those that he makes strong connections with. Opposed to him is Tetsuo, a younger kid in the gang who is desperate to prove himself and not always have to fall behind Kaneda. In the anime film, there is some time in the beginning of the movie to build up their dynamic a bit more, but in the manga, right from the get-go, our inciting incident happens. As the gang is speeding through somewhere that's off limits, Tetsuo almost runs into a strange child-looking person, and his bike explodes out of nowhere. And this chance encounter would begin Tetsuo's slow descent that would serve as the crux of the manga's story. After the encounter, Tetsuo begins experiencing strange physiological changes within himself, most notably gaining telekinetic abilities, but also experiencing splitting headaches and sickness as his body evolves. An aspect very relevant in the manga that's not really too present in the anime is the usage of pills and drugs, and this also feels like a representation of drug use in general, but also maybe even a commentary on pharmaceuticals, as the drugs are both meant to help the telekinetic project, but at the same time, they also limit the extent in which their powers can grow. It's something that makes them feel better for a moment in time, but long term, it holds them back from reaching their full potential, as a lot of pharmaceuticals seem to mask symptoms but don't actually go to the root of the problem. Basically, what's happening in the story, though, is that a section of government has been working with and experimenting on subjects that have this awakening power. Perhaps the next stage of human evolution, each subject is referred to as a number and hidden away from society at large in order to run tests on them. Many of them have died, some have managed to escape, but Tetsuo is just the newest addition and also seems to be the most powerful, or at least has the most similar power to Akira. Now, I don't really want to spoil either the manga or the movie if you're new to the Akira property, but I will say that in the movie, Akira, the character, works more as a concept and a representation of the next stage of human development, which is also reflected in the world's devastation and its uncertainty. Akira did exist, but is showcased more as an idea in the movie. Some people worshiping him as a god waiting for his return, some not believing he ever existed, and the government trying really hard to keep it all secret. However, the biggest and most major, and I mean major, difference between the film adaptation and the manga is that in the manga, not only does Akira still represent all of these ideas, but Akira is also a prominent character, and when he is revealed, he stays in the story for nearly its entire run until the end, and this creates a huge shift within the storytelling. If you wanted to actually adapt the manga right, you would really need two movies. One up until the Akira reveal and a massive devastation that follows his wake, and this happens about midway through the manga, and then the second movie would have to be everything that happens within Neo-Tokyo and the society after the fallout of that event. But as I said, the manga moves at an insanely quick pace, and though it does capture the same feeling and idea of the movie, there is a lot of differences at play. During Tetsuo's escape and the development of his powers, he briefly becomes the leader of a rival gang and goes up against Kaneda, something that only happens in the manga. It incites even more events that truly make him and Kaneda enemies from this point forward. Kaneda also gets tangled up with a resistance group against the government, including a girl named Kei, and he tries his best to mac on her. Mostly it's unsuccessful, but he gets better as time goes on. But Kei's character works in several ways to kind of give exposition at first, but also show how serious she is about her mission, leaving Kaneda with the choice to either follow suit or not. And towards the second half of the manga, she becomes probably the most important factor in going up against Tetsuo, with a lot more to do narratively than the movie ever allowed. But yes, all of the insanity of Tetsuo's growing powers are also on display in the manga, and the movie did it justice. This kid is terrifying with what he's able to do, and the more and more that he pushes the extent of his abilities, it very much becomes like having a god on Earth. And what in the hell humanity could possibly do in this situation to stop it? Tetsuo isn't exactly like Superman. His abilities are more telekinetic and not like super strength. But when it comes to a point where he's at his peak, it feels very similar. He even dons a red cloak that is reminiscent of a cape. But Tetsuo is really just a broken child without any real concept of the repercussions of what he's doing. The author said in an interview that with some of the commentary on youths is that they can become so self-destructive that they lose themselves within that, and that this may also play back into the drugs and pill aspect that I mentioned earlier. He says that a lot of them go berserk on impulse and then end up destroying themselves, but also how much of that is just in a response to the world that they live in, and did they even have another choice when you think about it? The manga doesn't beat you over the head with its themes or anything, but it's interesting in how dealing with these larger concepts of human evolution and destruction versus creation, then it also showcases us a world with extreme class differences, societal divisions, religious influence, and also oppressive governments. And maybe a lot of that is about control, or how we control other people, and that you can only control so much before those beneath you begin to rebel. The kids are rebelling just out of instinct of the world they were born into. And what if one of those kids had unimaginable powers? You have the authorities of the world experimenting and manipulating the youth for what they think could benefit them, so the older figures that should be there to look up to or give guidance are actually here just using the youth for their own selfish gains or to further their own agendas, which might be relevant to things that still happen nowadays. And that's part of the tragedy of Tetsuo. You can tell that he's a broken character, you can tell that he needs guidance, you can tell that he's desperate to have some autonomy over his own life, desperate for any semblance of control that he can find, and ultimately, just like the world he grew up in, it's not his fault entirely that he was burdened with these powers. There's also several characters in the manga that are super important that never really get the time to shine in the anime, Akira himself being one of them, and Lady Miyako. She's the leader of this religious group also looking for Akira, and in the anime she's only ever seen in the background and is killed off pretty quickly. But in the manga, she's arguably the most important character when it comes to lore and exposition. She has a history with the other psychics, she knows secrets to unlocking their power, she propels both Tetsuo and Kei's storylines immensely, and her final moments are some of the most badass in the entire manga. Now, probably the biggest curiosity you'd have if you've seen the movie and not read the manga is wondering about the ending. Well, it's mostly the same, but again, that's in terms of ideas and spectacle, but there is a huge difference in the mechanics of how it all works, as well as the final chapter itself is not really present in the anime. But in short, yes, Tetsuo's powers do become incredibly unstable, and we get the iconic transformation into his giant, disgusting, blob-like baby form. Though, in the manga, this transformation goes back and forth several times as he attempts to control it, rather than just giving us one huge transformation sequence. It's crazy, it's disgusting, and it gives you so much more than the anime does here. And yes, the existential and spiritual-like ending is also at play, but evolves kind of differently in the manga than how the anime depicts it. Akira is a legendary property, and also I learned it was the first manga to be translated into English for Western audiences, even distributed by Marvel Comics. That was pretty cool. They should put Tetsuo in the MCU and just have him kill everybody. That would be the real endgame, but they'll never do that. But it's not really a surprise that this was the first translated manga because it is an incredibly dense, action-packed, idea-heavy, and fun manga with lots of great characters to attach to. I'm honestly sorry it took me this long to read the manga, and now that I have, I can safely say that though it doesn't take anything away from the importance and the iconic nature of the Akira film, but the additions to the character development, the story element, and the things that flesh out the manga make it a much better experience from start to finish, other than just pure animation flair. I would say the anime basically covers the first half of the manga, but then changes several elements within that, and subdues a number of characters, and then almost all of the second half of the manga is completely removed, with only the ending being kinda sorta similar. If you like the anime, then I don't think there's any question that you would like the manga because it gives you so much more of what you already like and expands upon it. And if you've never seen Akira, then I still think the manga would be a solid way to start, though it might make you slightly disappointed in the movie storytelling when you watch it afterward. Overall, when it comes to the cyberpunk style manga, Akira is most definitely right at the top of the list. It's the OG, it's the template, and like all good sci-fi stories, it still holds up to this day. All of its ideas and themes are deeply human and relevant to almost any era, and things that I think we're still going to have to deal with for decades to come. And it's also filled with great action and spectacle-like sequences that I think can satisfy any sci-fi fan. So if you guys have read the Akira manga, tell me what you think about it in the comments. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Also, how do you rank it against the movie? And if you haven't, are you interested in checking it out now as opposed to before you watch this review? Anyways, let me know how you feel about it. Also, like this video and comment to help it in the algorithm. I'd really appreciate it if you did so. And don't forget to check the links in the description for my Patreon, channel memberships, merch store, and all the various social media links where you can follow me. Other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.